Hello. I'm going to do an in-depth dive on one artist this time. I think his name is Enrique Nieto. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but that's how I'm going to say it. This first story is called Can This Be Love? They're on an airplane. They're both getting over an old love, and so they're trying not to come on to one another, but you can tell there's chemistry between them right away. This is a romance comic after all. So they're on the plane, checking each other out, thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to get serious about him. She's gorgeous, but I'm not going to get serious about her. I took a vow. So he goes to the beach the next day, and he's like, oh man, none of these girls turn me on. But that little blonde was pretty cool. So he calls her up, and they go to dinner. I love his little flourishes he does in the backgrounds. Really great stuff. Good night, Charlene. Oh, he didn't even kiss me. Why didn't I kiss her? So they're thinking about each other all night. Some of his work is so elaborate, kind of surreal. And they go to the disco, and finally they break down. Oh, I can't get involved. Oh, yes, I must. Oh, well, I didn't want it to end this way. She's gonna break up. I didn't want it to end this way. So she goes back to New York, but she can't stop thinking about him. And he comes back, he comes and calls her up. Oh yeah, I'll go out with you. And she gets ready in a hurry. And they're out on the town. And in the beautiful skyline, he asks her to marry him. And she goes, yep. And a few weeks later, they're married. The next story is called The Shadow of a Star. This guy and the girl, they're kind of hitting it off. They're going to perform in a summer stock production with this, she's the understudy for this Ray Cole, the movie star. So they're hitting it off really well, and they're practicing the lines until the star comes in. Oh, and he just drops her right away. Thud, drops her on the ground. Oh, hi, Ray Cole. Oh, yeah. So they hit it off, and they're rehearsing, and she's just amazing. She's beautiful. She's talented. But the blonde, the understudy, she's like, well, I guess I can't compete with that. So she starts watching her, and she's like, well, she's not really so beautiful. She's just got her makeup and stuff. And she decides to study her. So she watches all her mannerisms and how she does things. And after a while, she starts to realize, I could do that. So she watches every little move she makes, and then she goes home and practices it. And her parents notice, oh, you've gotten a lot more sophisticated. Oh, no problem. So the next day they're waiting for it. So they decide to run through the lines. And he's like, hey, you know, you're pretty good. Well, and she starts doing all the little mannerisms and stuff that this star was doing. And so they're doing the act, and the manager is like, hey, she's really good. So they're rehearsing, and all of a sudden the star comes in. Stop it. Get that witch off the stage. She's just making fun of me. She's taking all my mannerisms and acting like she's me. So she gets mad and she leaves. She's thinking, oh, I'm going to be out of work now. She'll never let me understudy for her. Look at those backgrounds. She's such a great artist. So the manager comes and says, hey, you know, you were really good, and Cole quit the show. This is your opportunity. So she goes and she performs, and she does really well. And after the show, she gets more and bigger parts as the summer goes on in this theater company. Then finally, after the last show, they're walking together, and he's like, oh, you know, I heard you got an offer to be on a soap opera. Oh yeah, you know, I can be an actress now and make all kinds of money. He's like, well, I learned that I'm pretty good, but I'm not going to be able to make a fortune, so I'm just going to take a job. And she's like, oh, well, you know, that doesn't sound boring to me. And she said, you'll marry me? She says, yes, that's all I ever wanted. Look at those vistas in the background. He's so good. In this next story, the woman has planned her wedding, and she gets jilted by her man, and he leaves her with a plane ticket to Hawaii and a month off, and so she decides just to go by herself. So she's there in Hawaii, and she's met by this guy from the hotel. She's got everything but the groom. So they go to the hotel. Look at that work. And they weren't paying much. I think they were paying like $20 a page or something. And look at all the work he was doing on this. So the guy takes her up to the room and says, well, you know, we got everything ready for the honeymoon suite. The champagne's here. Can I pour you some? She's like, yeah, why not? So she's like, well, I got plenty of time. I guess I'll go to the beach. And she gets on her bikini and goes out to the beach. Everyone's checking her out. Look at the detail on that beach. Not to mention the guy's outfit. And the guy comes up to her, hey, you know, would you like to go surfing? She said, oh, how'd you know it was me? And he said, oh, like, you know, the concierge at the hotel told me to look for the beautiful girl. And she said, oh, you know, I think he was exaggerating. So they do some fancy surfing. She's all over the place. Look at that. And that night they go to a luau, and he introduced her to her grandfather. And he explains a bunch of Hawaiian stuff. There's a lot of Hawaiian jargon in the story. And she says, oh, I'd like to learn how to do the hula. So she's like, well, there's no time like the present. So she gets up, and he teaches her the moves, and pretty soon the drums are beating, and she's really going at it. And they're just really hitting it off. And, you know, grandfather comes over and says, hey, you know, that was the nuptial dance. You know, you're one of the family now. So she's like in love, and they decide that they're gonna check things out. She's gonna see Hawaii. So they go, you know, and the grandfather is telling her all these stories. Look at that. great work. So he's telling her, yeah, you know, it could take a lifetime to see all the islands. And she's like, well, you know, I'm young. So it's love. And they decide to go. Let me see. Man, that's some good artwork. I'd love to find some originals from these pages. Here's where she says she's young. Sorry about that. So they take a ride in the airplane and then with a couple other couples, and they go to the big island. And she's like, wow, this is really beautiful. And he takes her to the volcano, and they're watching the volcano, the lava running in the volcano. So he says, let's go someplace a little less spectacular. And he proposes to her. And she's like, well, I won't marry you now, but I will in a couple weeks. And they live happily ever after. Isn't that beautiful? Some great stuff. Sometimes they would have these little letter pages, and they would have different artists do illustrations. And this one has some Nieto illustrations. Jennifer's Corner. Very nice. Nice. And this one is called He's Not For Her. It's this woman and this man, they're getting engaged, and her little sister is watching, and she's like, I'm gonna break them up. They're not right for each other. Mala and Theo. Theo's the little sister. So she decides, I'm going to break them up, but I have to be subtle about it. They can't guess what I'm doing. So they go in the house, and she introduces herself and gives her a big kiss. And she's like, well, you know, I guess you can tell that she likes you. So that night she's dreaming about it and thinking, oh, I've got to do something about this. Got to be very careful that neither of them guess that I'm trying to break them up. Just, you know, his little incidentals, just the little house scenes, they're so nice. And look at that bedspread. It's so nice. So they go to she starts turning down dates, and so she can go places with them, and they go to the beach, and she's like, oh, you know, Mala's never gonna stop tanning. Why don't we go swimming? He's like, well, okay. So you get the obligatory swimming scene. And they play tennis, and Theo's a better tennis player. There's no writing credits on these, but they're kind of formulaic, and most of them that I've seen credits are written by Joe Gill. Like he was very prolific. So I don't know whether he wrote these stories or not. Driving in the countryside. Oh, so she takes him to pick up his car, and they stop at her friend's house. They were going to introduce her to his girlfriend. And they're like, oh, this is your girlfriend? No, she's just her little sister. And everyone's like, yeah, sure, just her little sister. So she talks her off, and she gives him a smack. So her mother's kind of upset when she goes in. What's wrong? Oh, Mala was crying. Her old boyfriend called, and you know, they had broke up, and she swore she'd never see him again. So Theo goes in to see her, and she's like, oh, you know, how could he call me after he broke my heart? And so Theo sees an opportunity. So she calls him up. And she goes and sees him. He explains that he had this job in the Middle East, and it could have been dangerous, and he wasn't sure he could come back. That's why he broke up with Mala. But he missed her all this time, and he was really in love with her. So Theo invites him for dinner, and also the other guy. So they're getting ready for the big meeting, and so of course Theo makes a move on her man, and I don't know what's going on here. Stories all start to blend together. It's just the artwork is so cool. So as it turns out, the two couples end up together, and they live happily ever after. And one more by Enrique Nieto, No More Kisses. So she meets this guy, and they're hitting it off at a party, but she gets an emergency phone call from her father. Hey, the doctor says it's important. So she's like, wait right here with what you're going to say. And she goes to the phone, and it's like, oh no, your dad had a heart attack. Oh, I'll be there right away. So she just runs out on the guy and never sees him again. But she goes, and her father's in the hospital, and like her mother had died young. So they're really close. So the doctor says, oh, he needs total peace and quiet. So they sell their house and move out to the seaside where they have a little shack. And she's like drawing and writing and selling stories to a magazine in the city. And they recommend a literary agent. So this guy comes out to meet her. And he's like, well, why don't you come to town so I can introduce you to some TV people. And she's like, oh, I can't leave my father alone here. Nice bird action there. So not many people are dedicated like you are. But that's just the way it is. So he starts coming out to see her, and he really hits it off with her and her old man, and starts to take him fishing, and so he's getting a little better. And father can tell that they're really getting along together. So finally, he says, "Oh, I noticed a shack down at the beach. Maybe I'll rent it." Yeah, so and so used to live there. It's not a bad place. So, he starts coming, pretty regularly. He's living down there on the weekends. Such a great outfit. And just the little flourishes he puts in the background. So cool. Enrique Nieto. So he comes up with this idea, I talked to the doctor, and he said it would be okay if you come and visit my folks in upstate. They've got a nice place. So they decide to go and they visit, and there's like they've got a little shack out back where they let him stay. It's like kind of a nice place. And he's like, I convinced my family, my parents, to rent you this house for cheap. She's like, why are you doing this? He says, I think you know. And she's like, yeah, I guess I do. So I want to marry you. Oh, and that's the end. And there's his signature. Nieto. Nieto. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little video, and you got to know an artist that maybe you didn't know before, and I hope you appreciate his work as much as I do. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and dig Enrique Nieto's art as much as I do. And if you like this video, then like it. And I appreciate any comments you make, and share it and follow and all that good stuff. So we fade out.